Hey Andy, how's it going?
Very well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. How are you liking ETHIndia so far?
ETHIndia is incredible. All of these ETH Global events have a specific kind of vibe and energy and flavor about them, and it all tends to be unique and informed by the country and the city that we're doing it in. And India brings this incredible energy and passion towards particularly complicated development problems. You know, the level of talent here is quite significant, and it's really inspiring to see so many people from so many different walks of life and from so many different parts of the country all just aggregate in Bangalore and come together to build amazing stuff.
Yeah, I'm inspired as well. What do you think about this venue that ETHIndia is at?
It's incredible. You know, I mean, just the way that you guys have set it up has been really, really incredible. You know, the auditorium here is probably the best that we've had at any event so far. So the fact that we can get everybody into the same room, do some amazing presentations, talk about both, you know, the technical aspects of what's possible to build in these networks and some of the philosophy behind why we're interested in decentralization and why it might be important for building a more equitable and accessible world. And, you know, the venue itself actually feeds into that, right? So the fact that there's so many different spaces where you can go and hack, where you can go and meditate, where there's a bit of yoga, where there's this amazing auditorium, you know, it reflects, again, the broad variety of interests that people who work on Ethereum and networks like it tend to have, right? We're not one-dimensional people. And so to have all of these different stations going on, it's really fantastic.
Yeah, India definitely lends itself to a lot of cool things. So how did you first find out about Ethereum?
So I had been working in Bitcoin prior to the launch of Ethereum. My dad was the head of tax, if you imagine that, at a big bank in South Africa, and was really interested in Bitcoin very soon after it launched. And had convinced me to do some research into it. And, you know, I had done accounting during school to sort of please him and hated every single second of it. So when he told me about Bitcoin, you know, I sort of initially kind of wrote it off as yet another one of his financial schemes that was largely uninteresting. But he eventually convinced me to do some research by paying me in Bitcoin back when it was worth, I don't know, like $40 or something. And I came to the realization that this actually had, you know, it had to do with so much more than just finance. It had to do with politics and how we organize socially, how we sort of structure society and how we inform culture. And so I was really interested in the sort of socio-political implications of Bitcoin more than the financial aspect of it. And so I'd worked for a year and a half with various different companies that were trying to do things on Bitcoin, like colored coins and some of those early attempts to expand it beyond simply a peer-to-peer electronic payment system. And it was quite frustrating, right? Working with Bitcoin is really interesting, but it's very hard. You know, the script language is difficult to work with. It's very low level, and it's very difficult to do anything beyond just peer-to-peer payments, although that in and of itself is incredible. And so when Vitalik had started talking about Ethereum publicly in Miami and various other places online, I'd sort of got interested by this notion that we could essentially take Bitcoin and implement a general Turing-complete language and essentially have a virtual machine operating on a chain that could then be coded, you know, in various different languages, and which would allow various different kinds of developers from web development backgrounds and back-end and front-end to actually interact with these systems and build interesting things on it. So as soon as Ethereum launched, you know, I was incredibly excited by the possibility implied by, you know, Turing-complete language and the ability to have like a sort of generalizable architecture on which you could do anything, right? So it wasn't just like a blockchain for payments and a blockchain for identity and a blockchain for voting. And you could actually just have one blockchain on which it was possible to do all of this stuff. And so as soon as Ethereum launched, you know, they sort of did DevCon 0 in an office in Berlin with like 40 people. And I wasn't at that particular event, but I was sort of watching from online and really interested in watching this particular community grow, because it seemed that it was full of interesting and quirky people who were thinking very differently about what it's actually possible to implement in production in the world. And ever since Ethereum launched, it's just been the most incredible ride. So that's what brings us here.
I hope the ride is crazy and awesome.
Yeah, I have no doubts that as this continues, it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder and more interesting to be a part of as the community continues to grow and we scale out the network.
Cool. So tell us more about your project and how it started.
So Status is the mobile window onto Ethereum. You can kind of imagine us like the WeChat of Web3. Essentially, we provide a mobile client that can connect you directly to Ethereum from your pockets, which is incredibly important, we feel, for the mass adoption of these kind of technologies. But we need to make sure that these technologies are given to people in a way that they can understand intuitively already. So Status presents itself as an instant messenger, where the messages are sent over a protocol called Whisper, which is part of the Ethereum stack. And it means that there's no servers between you and the people that you're trying to communicate with. So if Russia wants to try and ban us like they did with Telegram, the way that they tried to ban Telegram was by attempting to get the keys to their database so that they could decrypt the messages and see what people were saying to each other. It's just not possible to do with Status because we don't have a database, right? There are no servers in between you and the people that you're talking to. And yet it presents itself just as an instant messenger. And everybody knows how to use that, right? Everybody uses WeChat or WhatsApp or Telegram. And so it's an immediately understandable interface. You don't have to know anything about Ethereum to know how an instant messenger works. And then you get this added benefits that there's no possible way to censor the messages that you're sending over it. And it's sending directly to the peers that you want to communicate with. And then on top of that, we've got a native wallet and the ability to interact with any DApp on Ethereum from your mobile phone on your own terms, right? So it's really important that we sort of take the censorship-resistant, decentralized ethos of Ethereum and replicate that in such a way that as many people from across the world can access it and understand it without necessarily needing to dive all the way down the rabbit hole and know exactly how Ethereum works, right? When we use the web now, not many people know how HTTP and TCP/IP and all the protocols that run it actually work. And that's sort of what we need for the mass adoption, right? So we need to make sure that everybody is using Ethereum, but it's kind of in the background in the same way that HTTP and TCP/IP and all of those things are. And we feel that having an instant messenger where you can do completely private end-to-end encrypted conversations and then have access on the same technical stack to a global, immutable public ledger will lead to conversational commerce on steroids. It's a really interesting combination of technologies.
What's the most exciting project in this space that's not yours?
It's a really difficult question because there's so many exciting projects. So I think one of the other projects that's here is MakerDAO, and they've managed to produce a stable coin called DAI, which I think is going to be really critical also for mass adoption. The volatility of cryptocurrencies is something to be concerned about, especially when we think about getting the average user or normal people onto these networks. We can't have massive spikes in volatility because that's just not the sort of thing that your normal person, who's generally speaking quite risk averse, is keen for. And so having a stable coin that's pegged to, for instance, the US dollar, which is what DAI is pegged to, is really, really great. But there are a number of other incredibly exciting projects. Aragon is building decentralized organizations and experimenting with governance at the speed of software. I love those guys, and I think it's really incredible. The impact that they will have on socio-political organization is difficult to fathom. And live peers doing decentralized video, that's going to be amazing also for mass adoption and sort of actually doing media on these decentralized networks and again leading towards mass adoption, right? People just want to Netflix and chill, right? And if we can get Netflix and chill on a decentralized network, we win. So those kind of projects are the things that excite me the most.
I think you hit some big ones there. What is something that is the best thing that hasn't been built yet?
There are many best things that haven't been built yet. We've got a long way to go. We're only sort of 3 years into the network, and it's important to remember that the technology is still fairly immature. So, I'm really excited by the concept of TrueBit. They've made some really great progress. It's not complete yet, so I guess it counts as not built. They're doing sort of off-chain computation, so you can run incredibly complex computations like neural networks and various different kinds of AI and things that you would never be able to run on Ethereum itself because it would just cost too much gas and it probably wouldn't fit into the block. You can sort of do that off-chain and then provably verify the output of that computation with like one transaction on-chain. And I think that's sort of how we're going to see these sort of networks scale. Right? So there's a number of projects within the foundation itself, like sharding and proof of stake and Casper, the friendly finality gadgets, and Plasma. Those things are really important for scaling, but also this ability to do all kinds of different computation off-chain and then just prove the results on-chain is sort of what's really going to be interesting, I think, as we move forward into actually pushing these kind of technologies out to the wider population. They need to have the same kind of usability as what we currently have, and yet need to be backed by these decentralized public and immutable ledgers. And the way to do that is likely through off-chain computational courts and various other applications like TrueBit.
It seems like curiosity is a big driver with the hackers in ETHIndia. What are some of your experiences when you're talking to them?
There is a lot of curiosity here. It's awesome. It's awesome to see, right? So I think that when people are curious and inspired to learn, the possibilities are nearly endless. The level of question, like I was saying earlier, the level of talent of most of the people here is, generally speaking, very high. And so the questions that they've been asking they're really pushing me, right? I have to go deep down into some of the stuff that I'm doing, on a day-to-day basis, which is really experimental and on like the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff. And these guys in India are pushing me there immediately on day one, right? So it's not simple questions about, how do I spin up Geth or how do I write a JavaScript application? These guys are coming and saying, hey, I want to, I've got this idea to do a decentralized medical records that will contribute to the radiology department in Bangalore, for instance. And so they have like very specific use cases and yet like a good understanding of the base technologies, and they want to understand like, how do we get this stuff into production? How do we make it usable for people now? And that's hard, and it's really like it's so inspiring for me to see that there are a number of other people across the world who are capable of thinking in this way and then actually like implementing that stuff in production code. Very exciting.
Right. It seems like the hackers understand the power of blockchain and how it can change India. So the energy of ETHIndia is it's compounding. It keeps the organizers going, and it's why they organized it, for the past 2 months. And it's why volunteers come on and just like take on tasks and finish it within a few hours. It's why the hackers stay up all night and they sleep on mattresses. Post ETHIndia, how do we keep this momentum going?
Look, I think there's two key features to what drives these kind of things, right? Like participation and meaning. So these sort of decentralized networks are fundamentally about participation, right? Nobody's going to build the things for you that you want to see in the world. Like you need to contribute to it yourself, and that's fundamentally a part of the sort of ethos behind decentralization, right? Rather than expecting someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Larry and Sergey to build something for you that you then just use as a consumer, there's suddenly this opportunity for you to build the things that you need in the world, benefit from them, and also benefit the communities that you're a part of. So like this notion of like a participatory ethic is really, really like very important to what drives the curiosity and the passion of people involved here, and certainly what will take us further after these kind of events. And the other, and perhaps even like more important, is meaning, right? So I think that like anybody, all we're really looking for, particularly in our professional careers, is to do work with real meaning. Right? Like that's the goal. So many people in this world get stuck in corporate jobs where they do the same thing day in, day out, and there's just a complete lack of meaning in their professional careers. Right? You go and sit in the same office, the same people, and it's just like the same. Whereas here, we've got this ability to quite literally build a better world, right? And, how do we define better? Well, that's precisely the point, that for a brief moment in history, where these things are new and nascent and nobody really understands what they are and what the impact is going to be long term, we have the ability to define what these things mean at a very fundamental level. And I think that if we can get people participating in such a way that they can figure out that actually it's up to them what these networks mean, that's how you get people involved in the long term, right? Because all of a sudden they can do things on a day-to-day basis that they find meaningful and impactful in the world, and that's what inspires people.
Right. It's kind of like anyone's voice can be heard.
Exactly.
And people will come behind you and start to rally for you. It seems like people in the blockchain space are quirky. What's your quirk?
People in the blockchain space are very quirky. My quirk is probably in my off time I'm a poet.
Okay.
So I've got a published book, and I love my obsession in life is language, and how language can be used quite literally to manipulate reality. Right. This world is malleable and can be played with if you can learn how to express things in a particular way, and poetry is definitely the best form in which to do that. Right. So I love it. It's sort of like code for literary people. Right.
Language is so beautiful. I mean, in India we have so many languages, and it's kind of like Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi are kind of the melting pots of people from all these different cultures in India itself.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's exciting to be in ETHIndia, to be in Bangalore, to be a part of all this. To kind of round it out, what's your favorite emoji?
What's my favorite emoji? I think it's likely the joy one. Like you said, language is a fascinating thing. India in particular is rich in languages. The Sanskrit word for joy is ananda. And there is a sense that through a participatory ethic and through creating meaning for people, you can really create a joyful way of living. And in addition to that, the Oxford English Dictionary named the joy emoticon as the word of the year last year, which was really crazy, right? These like old staid Oxford academics are saying that the word of the year is an emoticon. Like, are you kidding? Right? And that sort of it indicates that the linguistic primitives that we're using to understand, interact, and share our worlds are changing. Right, and the fact that an emoticon can actually become the word of the year, oh my God, it's really indicative of a phase change, I think, in how we're interacting with each other, how we're describing our experiences of the world to each other, and sharing it with the people that mean the most to us. So it's got to be joy, man. It's all about joy.
Seems like it's the right time for joyful people to think about blockchain.
Hopefully, yes.
Thank you so much for your time, Andy.
Thank you.